Peace to everyone. Most of us spend our lives trying to keep a balance sheet. We weigh our good deeds against our bad ones, hoping that by the end of the day, or the end of our lives, the good side is just a little bit heavier. But what if the math we've been using is fundamentally broken? In any legal system, the standard is what matters. In God's kingdom, the standard isn't better than your neighbor. The standard is the perfection of God Himself. When we measure our lives against the absolute holiness of the Creator, we realize we aren't just short, we are bankrupt. It's like trying to jump across the Atlantic Ocean. You might jump further than I do, but we both end up in the water. This is what the Bible means when it says, "All have sinned and fall short." It's not a moral scolding. It's a mathematical reality. Let's look at the ledger. Under debt, we have every word we wish we could take back, every selfish motive, every moment we ignored the architect. Under merit, we try to put our charity, our church attendance, our niceness. But here's the problem. Merit doesn't erase debt. Doing a good deed today doesn't delete the wrong of yesterday. If you break a law in a courtroom, a good judge can't let you go just because you've been a nice citizen for 10 years. Justice requires the debt to be paid. This is the tension of the human soul. We know we are broken, the debt, and we know God is just, the collection. When a company is bankrupt, they don't need a new business plan or a motivational speaker. They need an infusion of capital from an outside source. They need someone who isn't in debt to pay for the one who is. This brings us to the most important legal turn in human history. Jesus Christ entered history as the only human being with a clear ledger. He lived the perfect life we were supposed to live. He didn't owe a debt to justice because he never broke the law. He possessed an infinite credit of righteousness. The gospel is not a story of God lowering His standards so we can get in. It is the story of God meeting His own standards for us. The exchange is about to happen, but it requires a sacrifice that changes everything. Here's the word that changes your life. Imputation. It sounds technical, but it's beautiful. It means to take what belongs to one person and legally credit it to another. On the cross, a double imputation took place. In the next few minutes, we are going to look at the mechanics of the cross. We're going to see how your red ledger was handed to Jesus, and how His gold ledger was handed to you. This is the great exchange. At the cross, history split in two. It wasn't just a man dying for a cause. It was the moment the great exchange became a reality. Imagine two accounts. One is yours, filled with the red of every failure. The other is Christ's, filled with the gold of perfect holiness. First, the liability was transferred. 2 Corinthians 5:21 says, "God made Him who had no sin to be sin for us." Notice it doesn't say He became a sinner, but He was treated as the embodiment of our sin. He stood in the courtroom and said, "Put their debt on my tab." Every lie you've told, every secret shame, every cold-hearted moment, it was legally imputed to Him. On that cross, Jesus wasn't dying for His mistakes. He was being audited for yours. He paid the justice that the architect's holiness required. But here is the miracle. The exchange wasn't just about taking away the bad. It was about giving you the good. The second half of that verse says, "So that in Him we might become the righteousness of God." You didn't just go back to zero. You were given an infinite spiritual fortune. In theology, we call this the double imputation. He gets our shame. We get His status. When God looks at a believer today, he doesn't see your red ledger. He sees the gold ledger of his Son. You are covered in the righteousness of Christ. There is a difference between being forgiven and being justified. Forgiveness means the debt is canceled. Justification means you are granted the status of someone who has always been perfectly obedient. It's the difference between a prisoner being released and a prisoner being adopted by the King. This is why the gospel is good news and not just good advice. Advice tells you what to do. News tells you what has been done. The transaction is complete. The check cleared. The debt is not pending. It is paid. When Jesus spoke those final words, he used the Greek word tetelestai. In the first century, if you had a debt and you finally paid it off, the merchant would write tetelestai across the parchment. It meant, the transaction is closed. Nothing more is owed. If you are in Christ, you can stop running. You can stop trying to make up for 20 years ago. You can stop the exhausting work of trying to prove you are worthy. The transaction has already happened. Your worth is now hidden in his wealth. But if the debt is paid, how do we live tomorrow? If we aren't working for God's love, what are we working for? In our final segment, we look at how the great exchange changes your daily life from a life of have to a life of want to. As system, if the debt is paid and the ledger is gold, why do we still strive? Some people fear that grace leads to laziness, but the opposite is true. Nothing motivates a human heart more than being loved when they knew they deserved to be rejected. This is the flip of the great exchange. Religion says, work hard and maybe one day you'll earn the king's favor. The gospel says, you have the king's favor as a gift. Now go live like a prince or princess. We don't work for salvation. We work from it. Imagine a prisoner whose bail was paid by a stranger. Does he walk out of the cell and say, great, now I can go commit more crimes? No. He walks out and spends his life wondering, who was that man and how can I thank him? Our good works are simply a thank you note to God. When the great exchange happens, God doesn't just change your legal standing. He changes your nature. He gives you a new heart that wants to please him. It's like a graft in a tree. You begin to produce new fruit because you are connected to a new source. Think of the psychological relief. Shame dies because Jesus took it. Competition dies because you don't need to be better than anyone else to be loved. Fear dies because the judge is now your Father. You are living in a spiritual surplus. The great exchange turns the courtroom into a family room. You aren't a defendant anymore. You are an heir. You don't have to perform to keep your seat at the table. You are there because of the signature on the check, not the quality of your service. Right now, you might be carrying a heavy red ledger. You've been trying to pay it off for years, through therapy, through doing better, through religion. It's not working. Today, the architect is standing before you, offering his gold ledger for your red one. Will you make the trade? Grace isn't just a nice idea, it's a person. Jesus Christ is the grace of God. If you have never truly rested in his finished work, let today be the day the audit ends and the inheritance begins. Where do you go from here? You start by thanking him. Then, you start learning about your new identity. Read the book of Romans. It is the legal brief of the great exchange, and find a community that celebrates grace, not performance. The ledger is closed. The price is paid. The exchange is complete. Go out today and live not as a slave to your past, but as a child of the King. Thank you for watching. It is all about Jesus.